Welcome back to the Daily Drum on WHUR and Sirius XM Channel 141. I'm Harold Fisher. Mind your manners. That's what we are talking about today. From the foundations of etiquette to how to choose the best wine for a meal or an occasion. The question so many of us are asking is, are we doing this the right way? Well, tonight, we have great experts to guide us through the process. My guests are Matthew Boyd, co-founder of Boyd Crew Wines, and Elaine Swan, etiquette expert. And boy, do I have a lot of questions for both of you. And I guess the first thing is I have to always remember how to say manners. Mind your manners. So look, thank you both for participating in this conversation. This is a really important conversation, for me, because I would like to think that, my parents taught me manners beyond please, thank you, and you're welcome. But Elaine, as you know, as manners and etiquette have evolved into 2024, things have changed. But let me ask you first and foremost, talk to me about the kind of the origins of what we term etiquette today.
It's funny because a lot of people think that etiquette, what it used to be was really, there was this rite of passage that people would go through. There was the very formal training where everyone had to go through this process so that they would know how to conduct themselves in society. It really all started out with folks misbehaving and needing to know how to act at events. They would be handed a ticket, and on that ticket there was a set of rules and guidelines and so forth. And so we do still experience that today, but the idea of going through that rite of passage where you have to go through this thing in order to then be presented to society, that's not necessarily something that we still practice today. However,
Okay.
we do still need to know how to conduct ourselves in a variety of fashions. Folks will often say, oh gosh, etiquette is a lost art. And I say, no, it has not gone anywhere. It's not lost. People still want you to conduct yourself in the proper manner, whether you are in line in the grocery store or online on the computer, whether you're at work in your workplace or even at home in your private dwelling. Folks still want to be respected, and they want you to conduct yourself in a proper manner. So it hasn't gone anywhere, but we just need to make sure that we really do pay more attention to how we're impacting other people.
But I would say this: you say from no, we are not in the age of Bridgerton, certainly, but I will say that in the African American community, we still know that there are still cotillions. Okay. There are organizations such as Jack and Jill.
Yes.
That are very, very focused on making sure that our young people know how to conduct themselves amongst their peers, how they respond to their elders. And this is part of grooming themselves for adult life in a more refined community. And so I would argue, Elaine, and I've spoken to a great many of my sister friends who lament the fact, and I'd love to hear what Matthew has to say about this, is that men, for example, aren't opening car doors. They are not holding chairs, in restaurants and the like. And my daughter, who will be 26 tomorrow, and she knows that even when she's hanging out with dad on Father's Day, that you don't touch the door handle when we're heading to the restaurant, whether you're getting in the car or getting out. She knows better. But the reality is it may be a lost art. What say you, Matthew, about that?
So one of the things that I do want to interject quickly about that is it's not the rite of passage that's only for the elite. And I
Okay.
think that's the key there. It's for every person. And so that's the one thing that I definitely want to say. And I think, Matthew, you probably agree with this as well. I think women, as we're starting to grow and become more independent, you have some women, and I've had girls tell me, well, my mom taught me to be very independent and not let a man open a door for me. And what do I do with the guy who wants to open the door? Well, then that's not your match. There's a difference between conducting yourself in a ladylike manner and allowing that lovely dance between men and women to go forth in a natural manner than trying to resist it. And Matthew, you probably, I guess, say the same thing, that there are some men who still want to, display a bit of chivalry.
Yeah. Is she right, Matthew?
I mean, I think it goes back to upbringing. I mean, I think like you talked about, Errol, you've shown your daughter that that's what to expect. So for her, she's going to expect the guy that she interacts with or that she decides to have a serious relationship, he's going to have to emulate many of those things that dad has shown that a man is supposed to do, right? I do the same thing for my boys. I open up all the doors for my wife. I open up all the doors for the women in my family. That was something my dad showed me. That was something my mom showed me. I can remember one time helping my mom out of the car. She gets to the door of the restaurant. She stands there because she knew that all the men in our family, my brothers, my dad, everyone was going to open up the door for her.
Right. Somebody gonna open this door.
Someone's going to open the door before she opens it, right? So, but I think it's a learned thing that you have to emulate. I think if we're being honest, part of that independence that sometimes women are taught in our community is because there wasn't a man there to do those things. So there was, I need to be so independent versus sometimes, and I told my wife this, she grew up in a very different environment with a single mom, very strong women. Hey, step back. I got the door. Hey, step back. I'll open up your door. I'll pull your chair out. And that was new for her. And it took us some time to kind of get into that dance and get into that rhythm. But I think it is something that as couples, you guys can agree upon and be able to still have that fun interaction that I think couples want to have with one another.
Right.
Yeah,
But
because
when
Elaine,
a man is doing this, it's not demeaning to a woman, and I think that's where some of these ladies they're feeling as though it's demeaning. It's not. He is just displaying affection. It's just another form of affection towards the woman.
okay, because I was about to say, and I've said this for a long time, a woman who considers herself, independent, strong, however you want to say that and chivalry etiquette can exist in the same space.
Agreed.
100%. Yes, indeed. Because you look up the word etiquette, you'll see my face, right? But I'll tell you one thing, my husband is the exact same way. He's the absolute perfect gentleman, absolute, and I had nothing to do with it. Everything came from his dad, with him watching his mom. We can be sitting in church together, and if I stand up to go to the restroom or something like that, my husband stands up at church. When I return back to my seat, he stands up to make sure I'm seated well, and it has nothing to do with making me feel demeaned or anything like that. But he learned it all from his dad.
Let's talk about some basic etiquette things. And when we're talking about going to dinner to a restaurant, I just got back from Europe last week. I was in London and I was in Paris. I was a witness to impeccable manners, particularly in Paris, even at cafes, and where you could see, Parisians, and these were Parisians of all colors, white folks, black folks, brown folks, but what do you say, Elaine, to people who just don't know what to do? You've got an armory of knives and forks to the left of me, an armory of knives and forks to the right of me. You've got uh, other stuff at the head of the table, and you're at a dinner, you're at an event, and folks are sitting on top of you, and you don't know what to do. What do you give me some etiquette 101?
Sure, just a standard thing when there's so many, always work your way from the outside inward. So as each course comes out, you just work your way with the cutlery, the glasses, everything from the outside in, if you know nothing else. And then, of course, visit my website, look at my videos, to really figure out, do that. And then try not to hold your cutlery like a caveman. Do your best to use the most graceful manner you can. Right. Even if you don't know exactly what to do, just don't caveman it. Do your best and leave it at that. The other thing is to just watch the table, follow who's at the table, kind of use your eyes to educate you in that moment. So you don't have to just dig in immediately, but you can pause for just a moment, talk to your table mate to the left or to the right of you, and watch, and then mimic the person who just appears as though they're doing it correctly.
Mm.
So that's if you don't know anything at all.
Which brings me to another issue. So Matthew, obviously you are a wine expert, and I do later in this conversation want to talk about the kind of the types of wine and selecting and what may be considered appropriate. But can we talk about glasses first for a minute, Matthew? Because and for our listeners who obviously cannot see, this will be posted on WHUR.com after 7 o'clock, because I'm going to have to kind of describe some of the things that we're going to be talking about. But one of the things Matthew, that I've noticed, whether it's at a formal dinner or something like that, or just at a refined household, for example, is that you've got all of these kinds of glasses, and they all, while some may be larger, some may be smaller. How do you know which one is for water? I understand there's some for white wine, there's some that may be for red wine. Help a brother out here. I mean, for example, I have two glasses here. Mm-hmm. One, obviously much larger than the other. One is a round oval shape. The other one is, I don't know. How would you do?
Well, so what I would say is, Harold, there are many different types of glasses, especially when it comes to wine. Now, if you're thinking about a water glasses can be anything that ranges from really something can be filled all the way from the top to the bottom. And normally most of your water glasses either will not have a stem at all, or they may have a very, very small stem, right? So that's kind of the way wine glasses are made. But both those wine glasses you had up the moment ago, those are predominantly considered more of like your red wine style glasses. So that first one that was much larger, kind of had more voluminous shape and size to it, that's more of like a Cabernet glass. So that's something that's going to have a beautiful Cabernet Sauvignon, grows really well with many different types of foods, but that's a red style wine. And you want it to have lots of that shape and envelope to it to be able to show off the acidity, to be able to show off what we call the bouquet of wine. And that just means more of that nose, what it's going to impart upon you from the wine. And then the other glass is more like a Burgundy or a Pinot Noir style glass. So Pinot Noir, a little bit more of a fragrant grape. I love Pinot Noir personally. That's like my wife's favorite type of wine. It's a beautiful floral bouquet, a little bit more petite. Pinot Noir is very hard to grow. So when you have a really good Pinot, you want it to be in the right glass so you can be able to partake of it the right way.
Hold that thought. I don't mean to interrupt you, but I've got to take a really, really quick break, and I want you to continue with your point. I want to remind our listeners that the Daily Drum will continue on Sirius XM channel 141. The Original Quiet Storm with John Mons is next on WHUR. I'm Harold Fisher. This conversation about minding your manners continues on Sirius XM channel 141 in just a few seconds. Welcome back to the Daily Drum on Sirius XM Channel 141. I'm Harold Fisher. We continue our conversation about etiquette and wine selection. The question a lot of us are asking is, are we doing things the correct way? Are we doing this the right way? My guests are Matthew Boyd, co-founder of Boyd Crew Wines, and Elaine Swan. She is an etiquette expert. Before the break, Matthew, you were talking about the different kinds of wine, but both of the wines that you were describing are dark or red wines. But what about a white wine? Does it matter what you drink out of, short of at the cookout with a red cup?
Well, short of a cookout in the red cup, it does matter if you want to be able to really enjoy the wine in the way the winemaker wanted you to enjoy it, right? And that doesn't mean you need 10 different types of glasses. But what I would always tell people is you really want to have, a couple of different style of glasses. So if you could have the two that you had earlier, which was a Cabernet Sauvignon or a Cabernet type of glass, a Burgundy style glass, a white wine glass or Chardonnay glass always goes well with some of your white wines. And that's a Chardonnay glass. It's going to be a little bit similar to the shape of that Cabernet glass, just not as tall normally. And then you can also have like a champagne flute as well to be able to have champagne from as well. Those are kind of, if I was to have 4 glasses, those would be the 4 types I would have, because I want to be able to enjoy my white wine and white wine specific type glasses. And then my reds, because I want to be able to capture and savor some of those red wines. And I'm going to be drinking that in a different style than maybe I would a champagne. A champagne, that sparkling wine, you really want to show off the bouquet of it, but you also want to have that collapsed glass shape that really holds those bubbles in nice and tight. And it just continues to evolve. I call wine is living. It's not dead. One thing people don't realize, that wine, the longer you have it in your glass, I'm not saying leave it overnight in the glass, because then you may or may not still want it. But that wine, as it's open, many of the reasons why we open wine and sometimes people
Oops.
see.
Go ahead. You froze up a little bit on me, Matthew. While we try to get that squared away. Okay, hold on, Matthew. You we lost you for just a moment. Finish that. Revisit that last point that you were trying to make, please.
Okay, I think I was at the point of where we were talking about
about just the kind of different. You said that drinking wine is a living thing. It is not dead.
Okay. I was trying to figure out where I dropped out. So wine is still living. It continues to evolve in the glass. And part of that evolving in the glass, you can allow it to sit, you can allow it to kind of take its time, but you really want to get more air on it because that helps aerate the wine. And that wine will evolve in the glass. And over time, you'll continue to be able to enjoy it. Once again, I'm saying don't set it out overnight. It's more of sitting there and I have a glass. Sometimes if I have an older red wine, so say if I pull out a Cabernet Sauvignon from 1995, I'm going to actually want to decant the wine. A decanter is it's basically a vessel to pour the full bottle out and be able to allow it to sit. Some people will double decant it. Some people will allow it to sit for a certain amount of time. I personally, depending on the style of wine, I still want to be able to decant the wine, especially my reds, because those are the ones that you're normally going to age for longer periods of time versus a white. And that decanting process will help open up the wine and you'll be able to enjoy it better. It's actually going to be a much more easy drinking or much more pleasurable experience when you allow the wine to quote unquote open up.
I do want to revisit those wine questions in a bit, but I wanted to go back to Elaine about the etiquette piece. Okay, Elaine. So one of the things that we've seen this on social media. If you are you're a married woman, you decide to hold a birthday party for your husband at a restaurant, and you decide to invite 10 of your friends. Who pays?
If you do the inviting, then you pay. Bottom line. And a lot of folks, they get this mixed up. They're not sure. I can go on and on and on about this. If you're hosting an event and you invite people to come to an event and you're the host, then you host 100%. It's just like inviting them to your home. There's a big difference between saying, you're invited, please come, we're celebrating such and such. There's a difference between saying that or saying, hey, guess what? We're all going to get together at such and such place. If you want to stop by, then, stop on by. That's very different to say we're all getting together, but be very, very clear. If this is an invitation, then you are the host and then you should pay. Now, let's say, for example, everyone gets together and you say, you know what, this is our girlfriend's birthday. We're all just going to get together. We've already determined that we're all going to pay for our own meal, right?
Okay.
My recommendation is to make sure that the birthday girl or birthday guy, that someone picks up the tab for that birthday person. Either everybody does and they all pitch in to do it, or maybe one person who's kind of the ringleader can be the person to pay for but the person that's you're celebrating, you don't want them to have to pay that night if you're celebrating that individual. But if you invite, be prepared to pay.
Now, this is where Matthew comes in, and our bougie wine folks, because so you invite again, Elaine, you've invited them to this French restaurant, Chez Bourgeois, and there may be a set menu, and you have decided to pay for your husband's birthday celebration, but then you've got Susan, who does not consume alcohol. She doesn't drink. You got Fred, who drinks too much, and you have the folks who are in the middle. What is the etiquette for, you pay for the meal, but when it comes to alcoholic beverages, how do you manage that? How do you navigate that? Because Fred has had 4 margaritas and Susan has had a Coke.
Right. So this is where it's really important to communicate. And a lot of folks are uncomfortable doing this, but I say embrace the awkward moment. Let folks know in advance if you can. Doesn't matter if it's a text message or what have you. Hey, listen, they're invited. I'm covering the meal, and your first drink is on me. Right? If that's what you want to do. Anything beyond that, whatever you don't want to do, let people know beyond that, I'm not paying for it. For so-and-so that's going to throw back 4 margaritas, then let them pay for you'll pay for the first one, but they're going to pay for their 3. Having that up front. This is whether you're invited or even, let's say, people get this confused all the time, right? Everybody gets together for dinner, and then people are ordering at different levels, and folks say, okay, well, let's just split the bill evenly. And I've seen a lot of arguments where people are saying, well, why should I split the bill evenly when I only had a salad and water, and you had an appetizer and the margarita and this and that, and so why do I have to pay for that? So I do have to say this as far as splitting the bill evenly. Typically, that is not something that folks would do. However, there are a few instances where the bill can be split evenly. And this is where, let's say everyone comes together, you're all friends, everyone's eating, and the experience is more elevated or exclusive. So perhaps you're dining with some big movers and shakers, some folks who you normally wouldn't even be at the table. This is your opportunity to get a seat at this table that you normally would not be at. So it's a more elevated experience in terms of the people. Or perhaps you are in a private dining area of the restaurant and you're getting that experience that is not normal you have a private chef, they're making things at your table, you know, the owner of the whatever it is, right? It's a little bit more elevated. It's that type of opportunity where you would see folks splitting the bill because everybody is getting that same experience regardless of what you do choose to eat.
Real quick,
unique. Those are unique instances.
I not only have you for a few minutes more, and there are a couple of other things I want to cover with you before we get back to some of the wine things. One of them, it has to do with proper undergarments, proper attire when it comes to white clothing. And this is obviously more for women, although we've seen the white parties. Should women or men for that matter, the undergarments, should they be black? Should they be tan? Should they be, what is the rule?
Sure. So underneath, we should not see lines or the undergarments themselves. So depending on your skin tone, you can go with black or either that deep brown or what have you that matches, but we should not see the lines of your undergarments, nor should we see the actual undergarment itself. So do not wear a white blouse, for example, with then white or tan undergarments underneath it. So we shouldn't see it. It should be invisible.
Okay. Some final thoughts from you about etiquette before we let you go. Help our people out, particularly men with hats in the building and hats at the table. That's a pet peeve of mine.
Oh my goodness, take that hat off. As far as hats are concerned, the hat comes off. I call it the 3 to 5 step rule for gentlemen. When you walk into that building, within that first 3 to 5 steps, that hat should come off. If you're sitting at a table, that hat should come off at the table as well. The only time the hat stays on is if you're outside. Now, I can say, let's say, for example, someone's having a Super Bowl party at their house, and you're wearing your favorite team or baseball party or what have you, and the hat is part of the ensemble. For a gentleman, it's in that instance where it would be acceptable to leave it on because it's part of the full ensemble for that particular occasion.
Okay. What's your web address and social media contact, Elaine? Because I'm sure there are a lot of people who want to learn more, and we're also going to post that along with this video. How can people find you?
Yes, people can find me on any social media platform at Elaine Swan, and Swan is spelled with 2 N's, just like the bird Swan. Or you can either visit my website, elaineswan.com or swanschool.com, and get free etiquette tips and advice.
Thank you so much. Hopefully you'll be able to continue to help people act right.
I would love to chat to you again. And Matthew, thank you so much for what you do. I love it. I learned quite a great deal from you today as well. So I'm looking forward to staying connected.
Definitely, Elaine. Can't wait to talk to you again.
Thank you so very much, Elaine. Take care of yourself. So Matthew, I want to really take a much deeper dive into the wine issue. First of all, and we've seen this in popular culture. How does one actually taste a wine? The formal process, I know, where they're rolling it around in their mouth and sucking in the air. Kind of take us through that and what that does when compared to just sipping it and swallowing it.
I mean, well, you know what? That's a great question, and it's something that we do during our tastings. And one of the first things I tell people before you even taste the wine, have your palate ready. That means I've had people come to our tastings, they're chewing gum. Hey, you're not prepared. You're not prepared to drink our wine, right? Because the gum is going to overpower the wine. So you got to spit the gum out, take some water. And it's not even just having your mouth ready; it's also have your nose ready. If you have a cold, the wine's not going to taste the same. You know, if you have a cough drop in your mouth, the wine's not going to taste right. You know, so all those things can lead up to the palate not even being prepared to receive the wine. So first, make sure your palate's right. Clean your palate, meaning drink some water, drink something that kind of clears whatever the taste you were eating or drinking prior to having that first sip of wine. That's the first thing you want to do. Second, when you pour the wine in your glass, look at it. Does the color look right? Does the color, if you're drinking a Chardonnay, is the color kind of like a nice golden hour yellow? If you're drinking a dark red, is the color a nice ruby red, dark blood color, right? Or if you're drinking a champagne, does it have bubbles? The worst thing to do is you pour some champagne in your glass and it's flat, and you're like, I just opened this bottle. This bottle should have bubbles. It doesn't. I know that champagne is not good, and I probably shouldn't drink it, but I might take a sip just to make sure. So first thing is you're seeing the wine, right? Next, you want to swirl the wine, because we talked about in that wine glass, right? You want to be able to swirl the wine. That helps, once again, open that wine up a little bit. Gets a little more air on the wine. It helps prepare the wine. Like we talked about it before, the wine's living. It's a living, breathing organism there. You want to be able to swirl the wine, put a little bit of air on it. Next, you want to take that first smell of the wine. So when I see the wine, when I swirl the wine, my next thing is to smell the wine. That means I'm putting my nose in the glass and I'm taking a deep smell of it.
Okay.
I really want to inhale the wine, because most people don't realize you actually taste more with your nose than with your mouth.
Mm-hmm.
You're tasting more with your nose than your mouth. So you got to really prepare your nose to inhale the wine. And as soon as you start doing that, you'll start feeling your salivary glands start to secrete saliva, preparing your mouth for what you're about to have. That's helping prepare that palate. And then lastly, you want to take that first sip. That first sip, I always take a sip of the wine, enough to get a full coat in my mouth, and then I kind of roll it around in my mouth, just kind of seeing where the wine best sits. And then I swallow. I kind of take a step and I say, that's an interesting taste, or that I taste this, I taste that. And then really it's all about savoring the wine from there. So I do that for almost every wine that I have. One of the things we talked about earlier about etiquette. So one thing people don't know is when you have that first sip of the wine, or say if you order a bottle of wine at your table, Harold, you're out at dinner, the sommelier brings over a bottle, you say, hey, I want this vintage of 2005 Pinot Noir. Most people will take a sip when he pours that first sip, when he pours that first little taste in your glass. Really, that's just for you to smell. You should be able to tell if something's wrong with the wine by seeing it, smelling it. You don't necessarily need to take a first sip to tell if you like it. Because for me, I know my wines a little bit. I know what I like. I know what I don't like. So I can be able to easily pick up on, is it the right color? Does it smell right? And then from there, I'm like, okay, it's good. I don't need to taste it, because for me, I know those are the wines that I like. Now, if it's something brand new I've never had, then maybe I'll take a sip of it just to make sure I really like it. But normally that's kind of the process I go through with almost every wine. But like I say, you really want to, kind of go through those steps for every wine that you drink, unless it's something they're just like, hey, this is my go-to every Friday night wine. I know how it's going to taste. I know how it's supposed to be. Then maybe you're a little bit more casual with it, and you're going to pour in your glass and just savor it and enjoy it.
Which brings me to my next question about the go-to on a Friday night. I'll probably get in trouble for this, but I've been joking about this for quite some time. Whenever you go to a wine store, liquor store, and the sisters are like, "Where's the Moscato?" Because I always say, that's a black woman's Kool-Aid. It's, and I joke about that, but this is less about black women and more about black folks and those who really want to enjoy wine, because some of it, everyone likes sweet, but if it's not sweet, they may think it is bitter. Okay, how do you develop a good palate for wine that isn't just high in sugar, that's just not sweet? And how do you know if it is good? Who determines that a wine is good, if it's a 2005 vintage or a 1905 vintage?
Well, one, I would say this is two things we believe in at WHUR. One, we don't make sweet wines. We make fruit-forward wines, meaning we don't add any RS or residual sugar to any of our wines. We want to make fruit-forward wines that people can be able to enjoy. And that's one thing that we do at WHUR.
So when you say fruit-forward wines, what does that mean?
meaning we make wine to show off the fruit and don't have a lot of over. What you can do with wine when you age them, especially your red wines, you can age them in new French oak or new American oak, new different types of oak, and oak imparts a certain type of flavor on the wine. So when people say they can taste tobacco or leather or all those things, that's really the oak. It's not the grape. So what we try to do with Boy Crew is we want to be able to allow you to taste the grape. How is that grape supposed to taste? So we use a little bit more neutral French oak. That means French oak that's already been previously utilized. The barrel's been cleaned. We age our wine in those type of barrels. And then we also use some new French oak as well and do a lot of blending to make sure we're imparting the taste we want. But back to your question about like, how do you taste wine or how do you get past sweet wine? From a scientific standpoint, so I'm a scientist by background, I'm a pharmacist. One thing that everyone has to know is everyone has a different taste profile, meaning genetically, my taste is different from yours, Harold. Women are known to be able to taste what's called umami flavors better, meaning compared to men, umami flavors are those savory flavors. Women can taste those better. Other people can taste sweetness more. Other people can taste sweetness less. Other people can taste sourness more. Other people can taste sourness less, right? So that's one thing everyone has to understand. So we go into it, you like what you like, but we want to help people be able to experience wine differently. So one of the first things you can do if you are one of those people who you only do Moscato, start with Moscato, but then go to a semi-sweet white. And then after you've been able to have that for a period of time, then try a drier white. And then you can try an even drier white that has no residual sugar. And then you can kind of get into your red wines, which predominantly most of those are going to be on the drier side, right? So that's the way I would probably tell people to stepwise it. Because if we're being honest, there are a lot of people who just stay with sweet wines, not because they necessarily think it's good, but because that's what they like on their palate. That's what they're the type of person that they want a sweet margarita. They impart sweetness with being something easy to drink versus being able to savor something over a longer period of time. So I tell people when you're trying to experience different wines, once again, one, make sure that palate is prepared, because you're not going to, if you're someone who likes a sweet wine and I give you a bottle of my Living Legacy to sample and your palate's not prepared, you're not going to like it. Because that Living Legacy is a red, dry wine, and you like sweet and your palate's not ready, right? So all those things can help you kind of get to a place where, one, you can enjoy drier reds or drier white wines, but two, you don't have to have all the sweetness. Because let's face it, we all know what's one of the biggest things that are killing our community.
Yeah, sugar.
Salt and sugar. Yeah. Salt and sugar. Salt and sugar. Those two things, we have to really monitor how much of we have in those, because think about all those foods that you can have that have all the added sugar in them, and you're thinking about it, after a full day, you could have 100 grams of sugar. So the last thing you want to have before you have that last sip of wine at night is another 30 grams of sugar in it, right? You want something that's going to be dry, easy drinking. Hopefully you can go to bed easier, not waking up in the middle of the night because you've had a whole bunch of sugar. So that's another thing I always point out to people is take your time. Everyone's not on the same trajectory, so you don't have to start liking dry wine today. But over time, prepare your palate. Be willing to try different things over time and introducing your palate to it. Because one of the things I tell people is, if you haven't introduced your palate to it, you're not going to like it. So slowly introduce yourself. So don't jump into, I want to take a 1997 Harlan Estate Cabernet blend, because you're not going to like it. But right. I would say is, hey, try a 2022 red wine that's medium dry. Try that. And so those are the things I would tell people to kind of slowly integrate themselves into enjoying drier wines. And then you'll end up on a tangent. You'll go off into multiple different things. And then lastly, the other thing I'll say, Harold, is wines from different regions. So as you get into wine, one of the things you'll find is, I've only had this particular region. Well, you can have wine from almost anywhere in the world. There's Australian reds and Australian whites. Australian Pinot Noir is going to taste totally different from a Pinot Noir made in Napa. or Burgundy made in France. So that's the other thing I'll tell people is don't say I don't like something, because you haven't. You most likely have not had it from every region that you could have had it from.
So, gosh, I wish I had more time, because there's just so many things I want to ask you about. But for example, let's talk about alcohol content. So, I like Sauvignon Blanc. Okay, it is not very dry. It's very fruit forward. It's a very fruit forward wine. But Sauvignon Blanc has a higher alcohol content. No matter what I buy, I mean, the lowest alcohol content that I will find for Sauvignon Blanc may be 11.5%, but usually it sits around 12.5 to 13, and sometimes even 13.5%. What determines alcohol content, and how does that, and why is that important?
Well, normally, so what's going to normally determine alcohol content is, one, the winemaker, right? So it's going to be a lot determined by the winemaker, how it was blended. But lastly, did it go through its quote unquote full fermentation process? So what I call that is, was all the residual sugar taken out of it? So that's kind of how you can normally tell if something has a lower alcohol content. So you say like a Sauvignon Blanc at 11.5%. It probably has a slightly higher sugar content versus a Sauvignon Blanc at 13% probably has a much lower sugar content, because all those sugars were taken out through the fermentation process. That's one. But then the other part is, the winemaker can do certain things to the wine where they can be able to either lower the alcohol content based upon the way they blended the wine, or they can kind of keep it at a higher point. Most of your whites are going to be slightly lower at 11.5 to 13%. Some of your reds can go all the way up to 15.5% or so. And that's the other thing we talked back about taste of. Okay, if I'm just getting to wine, stay closer to 12.5, 13% alcohol content. When you jump up to those 15.5%, that's going to be a drier wine. Most likely drier wine, unless residual sugar was added to the wine after the fermentation process, which sometimes winemakers do as well, to what we call in the business fatten up the wine and make it have a little bit of a different, fatter mouthfeel in the mouth. So those are things that are normally done, but that's an alcohol content thing where I would say most of your whites are going to be in that range, and then most of your reds are in a little bit of a higher range when it comes to alcohol content.
Real quick, because I'm low on time, I wanted to bring this up. So this small glass is it looks a little bit bigger than a communion glass. This is purports much higher alcohol content. Talk to me about ports and why the glass is so small, real quick.
So ports are beautiful wines, but they've been aged much longer and they have a much higher alcohol content. Most of your ports are going to be close to 20% or more, right? So, and they have a little more sweetness, and they're kind of called a digestive, or they're more for kind of that meal that you have with dessert type of wine. So it's almost like a dessert type of wine. Similar with, I think you do you have that sniffer ready, or we have time for the
sniffer?
I
do. Real quick. Give me that in 10 seconds.
So 10 seconds, that sniffer, great for cognac or brandy. Once again, that's smaller. People don't know cognac's made out of grapes. So if you like wine, you're probably gonna like cognac, but higher alcohol content, smaller glass, because you're only supposed to have a little bit.
There you go. Matthew, how can people find out more about you and the company online?
Hey, you can find it out everywhere, almost every social media platform, called Boyd Crew Wine. So it's Boyd, our last name. Crew means growth in French. Wines is what we do. We say come sip outside the lines with us. So come see us at boydcrewwines.com.
And that's BOYDCRU.
Yes, CRU.
Not CREW, but CRU.
CRU. Yes, you can be part of our crew, but come and see the crew.
There you go. I appreciate it. Matthew, thank you so very much. I really appreciate it. And we will be in touch, because, maybe I need to come out and do some sipping as well. Thank you so much.
We would love to have you here anytime. Thanks so much.
Thank you. That is the Daily Drum for this Friday, June 21st. For News Director Renee Nash, reporters Millette Green, Vermonte Bryant, producer Candace Atkins Wilson, and engineer Bobby Adams, I'm Harold Fisher. Good night and have a wonderful weekend.